Hello, Angel Ariano Jr. here again, and welcome to another edition of According to the Scriptures. You know, I am often asked, Angel, which is the best systematic theology? And you know, to ask this question is to put the cart before the horse. And in this short video, I'm going to show you that this is the case. And I'm going to show you this by a very brief comparison of several systematic theologies. You know, there are pros and cons to using systematic theology. So there are right ways and wrong ways. And so, moreover, there is one major danger in the pursuit of the so-called best systematic theology. So in this short video, I'm going to help you to identify it in order to help you avoid it. So without any further ado, let's get right to it. So the first one on my short list of examples is the one written by Louis Berkhof in 1941. Then there was the one that preceded this one, the one written by Augustus Strong in 1886, and the one that focused solely on New Testament theology, which was written in 1963 by Ethelbert Stoff. And then last on my short list is the one that was written by J. Oliver Buswell in 1962. Now, my list is not intended to be exhaustive, but what is said here is true of all systematic theologies. And now you should get my point right after I tell you one thing about these systematics. And this is my point. The one written by Berkhof was written from a Reformed perspective. The one that was written by Strong was written from a Baptist perspective. And the list goes on. The one written by Stauffer was written from a Lutheran perspective. And the one written by Buswell was written from a Presbyterian perspective. And we know, if you know anything about theology, that all of these systematics have great disagreement in many areas. For example, those in the Reformed tradition, such as Berkhof, believed that the Bible teaches that infants are to be baptized. This was rightly rejected by Strong, who was a Baptist. And there are many, many, many other areas of disagreement amongst these systematics. And so this is why I say to ask this question, which is the best systematic theology, is to put the cart before the horse. They all claim to be giving you Bible, what the Bible teaches. Instead, what they are giving you is what their denomination has taught them. And so because of this, they all contain a particular theological slant. So by looking to systematic theologies first, one is fitting himself into a man-made theological system. In other words, they are unknowingly indoctrinating themselves. They're looking to the systematic first and then consulting the Bible, which amounts to using the Bible as a proof text. As Bible students, we should be using the Bible to determine the truth, not systematic theologies. And now, this is not to say that there is no value in systematics, for these are great for learning the essentials of the Christian faith, because there is overall agreement amongst all Protestants and systematic theologians, and more disagreement on the non-essentials than there are on the essentials. Now, what are the essentials? They are systematic theologians and denominations in Protestantism are all in agreement in these 9 areas of theology. They all adhere to these. These are essential doctrines. First, the Bible is the sole authority. The deity of Christ, the doctrine of the Trinity, the virgin birth of Christ, Christ's bodily resurrection from the dead, salvation by grace alone, the doctrine of hell, Christ's second coming, and original sin. General agreement here. As we move towards the non-essentials, you're going to notice great disagreement, and this list is not exhaustive either. This is just a small tidbit of where they differ. Systematic theologians and denominations in Protestantism disagree on these. Eschatology, that's why they have dispensationalists, preterists, and so on and so forth. Then you have the mode of baptism. Should we baptize by immersion or by sprinkling? And now from this arises the question, are we to baptize infants? Paedo baptism, which Reformed, Presbyterian, and Lutherans adhere to. There's not a drop of evidence for this in the Scriptures. Fourth of all, the Lord's Supper. Should we be using wine or grape juice? The so-called covenant of works, which is clearly unscriptural, and 2 more. The covenant of redemption and the covenant of grace. Then there's the law of Moses. Does it apply to Christians? And if it does, What part? Soteriology, the infamous soteriology discussion, Calvinism, Arminianism, and Lutheranism. Now, these are just some of the subjects on which they differ. There are more. So if you want to use these to broaden your understanding of doctrine, what you are really doing is you're looking to them to determine truth. And like I said earlier, you're using the Bible as a proof text. Who, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses, who use their watchtowers. They read the watchtower, and they contain special footnotes on their theological statements. And then they are led by the leaders to the bottom of the page that contains biblical texts that allegedly support their statements. And so what is happening here is that they're indoctrinating themselves. And this is much the case when you look to systematics first and then the Bible. And so I said, this is okay in the essentials because all Protestants adhere to the essentials. And now I must point out that there are certain systematic theologies that are to be avoided at all costs. I'll list a couple of them. The one written by Paul Tillich, which was radically liberal. He was a liberal existentialist. And that's why I say that not all systematics are created equal. This is just another reason why. And now, another one is the one written by Karl Barth, entitled Church Dogmatics, 14 volumes, written in 1947, which are based on his lectures. Barth was an unconventional Calvinist. In other words, he was a modified Calvinist, and more importantly, he was neo-orthodox, which he held that the Word of God is not the Word of God until it becomes the Word of God to you, known as crisis theology, which should be blatantly rejected. And last of all, that Mary is the Mother of God. Shifting gears slightly, there are other books on theology containing the term basic. For example, there was the one that was written by Charles Ryrie, and notice the title, Basic Theology. And there's one that was edited by Carl F. Henry called Basic Christian Doctrines. And the last on my list is the one by Walter Martin, Essential Christianity. Look at the bottom, it reads, A Handbook of Basic Christian Doctrines. No such thing, and I'll tell you why. And they're also, like the systematics, they're claiming to teach Bible. Like the systematics, Ryrie was writing from the Arminian perspective, and he was a dispensationalist. The one edited by Henry contained a strong Reformed strain and was Calvinistic. And then the one by Martin was clearly Arminian. And so that's why I say all of these books, systematic theologies and those that contain the term basic, they all contain a particular theological slant. And now to bring balance to all of this, and to give credit where credit is due, I'm going to be fair here to the Reformed tradition as well as the Arminian perspective. And although I am anything but Reformed, this does not mean that I do not consult the writings of Reformed theologians in certain areas, nor those of Arminian theologians. First on my list is the one written by Stephen Charnock. It is superb on the nature and character of God, entitled The Existence and Attributes of God, in 2 volumes. He upholds God's sovereignty and gives God his proper place as the sovereign creator and upholder of all things. Unlike Arminianism, which is man-centered, since man controls his own destiny, in Calvinist theology, God is sovereign even over man's fallen, darkened will, which is not the case in Arminian theology. And now a word on some good systematic theologies by Arminian, Calvinist, and what I have termed Calminian theologians. First on the list is the one written by Millard Erickson. He was a Baptist, and though he was an Arminian, but however, despite his man-centered Arminian view on salvation, his work is very good, and here's why. He was otherwise a very, very fine theologian. He was a lucid writer who writes with clarity, and he was fair in displaying opposing or alternate views, which is not the case on many systematics. So now this brings us to another one, entitled Abstract of Systematic Theology, written by James P. Boyce, authored in 1886. Boyce was a Southern Baptist, so it means he was not Reformed, but he was a Calvinist. Another one is the one that was written by Henry Thiessen, Lectures in Systematic Theology, based on his lectures. Like Boyce, he was a Southern Baptist, but however, he was what I call a Calminian. He had fragments of Calvinist theology as well as fragments of Arminian theology. And now to answer the question, which is the best systematic theology? Answer, there is no best. If you're seeking to learn what the Bible teaches on various subjects, as I said repeatedly, they all come from a particular theological or denominational point of view. So in bringing this video to its foregone conclusion, I want to recap what we have learned. Number one, the question, which is the best systematic theology, is tantamount to putting the cart before the horse. Like I have said repeatedly, they all contain a particular theological slant. Number two, we should begin by studying the Bible, but not through the lens of a systematic theology. The danger is very subtle here. By beginning with systematic theologies, you will fit yourself into a certain theological or denominational system. In other words, you will indoctrinate yourself because you began with a systematic theology rather than the Word of God. Remember, all of them have strengths as well as weaknesses. Number three, using the systematics to learn the essentials is safe because there is overall agreement with all Protestant denominations on these. And so hopefully this video has been of assistance to you. And until next time, this is Angel Ariano reminding you to always do all things according to the Scriptures.